Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we are going to look at the new Regiments roadmap that just dropped today. So far it looks like the life cycle for Regiments is going to be between 2022 and 2023. I will post the roadmap down below in the description and you can check it out for yourselves. But if you like military strategy, tactics, and doctrine and seeing it applied to strategy games, I guarantee this is the channel for you, so make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Also, there's some fantastic gameplay playing throughout this discussion and this in-depth analysis. So make sure you check it out. There's some amazing airstrikes and some artillery strikes. And overall, the battle was a fantastic push and pull, a tug of war. And now let's dive into the roadmap. So the first DLC that's going to be released is rumored to be free. It is called Immediate Reserves. It comes with one new operation as well as one or possibly two new maps. Also, the UK will only be playable in skirmish when this one releases. So overall, it's an exciting release. We do get the Chieftain from the looks of it. We can put that 120mm cannon to use and use some new regiments inside of skirmish and only skirmish, because they definitely highlighted that point when announcing the UK with this DLC. So overall, it's something I'm very excited for. I can't wait to put that cannon to use. The Chieftain saw service between the early 60s and the late 1990s. So overall, early Cold War and late Cold War weapon system saw service in the Iran-Iraq War. Overall, I'm excited to put this system to use. I want to see the new maps, one, because they're talking about including amphibious operations. So that's also going to be interesting to see. We can see if that's included in this new DLC or if they're designing the maps around that. All right, now we're going to move on to the next DLC. Let me know if you guys are looking forward to this first one. Now, the next one we're talking about is called Northern Forces. This is going to be the first paid DLC in Regiments, and it contains the full UK roster, so that Immediate Reserves DLC is just a taste of what's to come. But furthermore, this one comes with some major changes to Regiments. You're also getting the Polish forces as well as the Netherlands, but we're getting heliborne and motorized infantry on the battlefield. That's right, we're finally getting some infantry to control and move around the battlefield and maybe repel in and do some tactical insertions. Overall, it's going to be one of the first major changes coming to Regiments in DLC form, and you do not need to buy the DLC to have access to these updates, obviously. So that's one thing to make note of. You do not need to buy this DLC, but the heliborne infantry may only be a part of those DLC regiments. So we'll see. We'll go from there. They haven't really gone into too much detail how they're going to implement these new forces, how they're going to implement heliborne infantry, or how they're really going to be controlled. I'd be interested to see how they're implemented, if they're going to dig in, if they're armed with ATGMs, if they're really going to punish any mechanized forces or armored forces. There is a lot of tank-on-tank combat and ATGM usage in this game. So I'm going to be interested to see how much the micro increases and if it's a bit excessive. So overall, I'm excited for the Northern Forces DLC, and I hope you are too. Now we have a few more things to discuss. We're going to dive into the next DLC. The Central Group of Forces is the second paid DLC. Should be here around early June, maybe a bit earlier, maybe a bit later, depending on the developer's timeline. It contains Canada, France, and Yugoslavia. Overall, some fantastic forces to add. I can't wait to play as the Canadians. I think the only game we can do that in right now is Steel Division, Combat Mission, and a few other real-time strategies. Overall, I enjoy playing as that division. They have a interesting force structure, some interesting regiments, and some weapon systems. I know at this point the developer started mentioning that he was a bit concerned about the regiments not differentiating or maybe identical. We're going to discuss how he's going to work around that, or how they are going to work around that later on in this video. Let me know if you're excited for the Central Forces group. There is France. France is always fun to play. The Mirage, we put the Mirage to work. We can try some new strategies, see what they include. I'm really wondering what kind of maps they're going to use for these amphibious operations. But with Netherlands, we can get the Rhine, right? We can run some operations like Operation Market Garden right across the lower Rhine. That'd be fun to do. So let me know if you're excited for this one. Obviously, France, Canada, overall fun. Yugoslavia is always one that catches me by surprise, but I know it was a big player in the Cold War, and I really need to brush up on my history of the Cold War, so don't hold me to any things like that. But overall, we're going to dive into the final update. But there's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to discuss after all these DLCs. Lots of gameplay changes, speculative changes, things like that. All right, stand by, guys. All right, and then the final DLC, drum roll, is called Final Update. So this is what I wanted to bring up. This is where I'm going to start bringing up some of my concerns. So far, they have no idea what they're doing with this DLC when I'm reading the roadmap. At this moment, they don't really know the scope, what it's going to be, because they haven't decided on if they're ending the life cycle for Regiments in 2023. So they don't know if it's going to be a small farewell content pack that's going to add to the existing nations. But I assume if everything sells well, they would include some more forces or maybe a few new operations or regiments. It really depends on what they're trying to do with regiments long term. And it doesn't seem like they have much of a plan outside this first year. So that really starts to bring in a lot of concerns for me. So, I mean, it's kind of old school as far as gaming goes. I know a lot of games are transitioning into the not live service, but long term. Like we have Steel Division that's still getting updates. War Knows, I mean, been early access for a year. You have War Game that got an update a while ago, and Combat Mission gets regular updates. But those are all different size companies. I know this is a one developer project, so it's interesting to see what they're going to do, how they're going to pile on DLCs after or during the final update. I'd also make note that they don't want to saturate what they have, so they're going to discuss a few things here in a bit. We're going to talk about potential features, the developer concerns, oversaturation, and really a lot of issues that a lot of Cold War developers or Cold War game developers run into later on in their projects. So with all that being said, final update, not much information, but we're going to dive in and check out the rest of it. All right, guys? All right, the first thing we're going to do in this section is talk about the potential add-ons that are going to be coming to Regiments, and then I'm also going to give my opinions on these add-ons and talk more about some of the cons that I see for Regiments and with these add-ons. So overall, it's going to be a blast. It's going to be an open discussion down in the comments. Just let me know. So let's just start at the top. I'm just going to read them off. And then I'll talk about how each one I think is good or is bad or what I foresee the issues being. So one, a new skirmish mode. We're going to talk about more modes a bit later, but they are going to add a new skirmish mode. That's going to be fun to play. I played Meeting today, and that was an absolute blast, as you see in the video. Deeper morale and experience system. This is one I'm going to talk about after I finish this list. I'll come right back to it. Regimental doctrines. I want to see how these are going to implement that. Terrain decals. We'll talk more. Improved urban destructibility and refined effects. Definitely something we really need to discuss in this game. Towed equipment. I'm really excited for that. I would like to see how that's implemented. Overall, a challenging feature to implement in any video game. So let's see how he's going to do it, or they are. Amphibious vehicles. Like, he's really bringing up amphibious operations throughout this roadmap, and I hope it's executed. If it's done poorly, that's fine. I mean, it's a complicated thing to execute, so even any sort of amphibious operation is always a blast to see. Long-range SAM support and combat air patrol. I really want to dive into combat air patrol. Long-range SAM support, it don't really matter too much to me. Steam Cloud saves, obviously, and GeForce Now support. I guess if you're going to play on your Steam Deck, or if you go to your friends and have friends, that's something to make note of. And then more optional rules, events, and regiment task forces. There's still a lot of things to cover throughout this roadmap, so hang with me, guys. Now we're going into the opinion section on this potential add-ons. So like every good YouTuber, I need to weigh in my own opinion on a lot of things, and we're going to do that right here in this potential add-ons. Let's start with the new skirmish mode. So the 3 new rumored skirmish modes that are coming is a dedicated defense mode without transport units of the mobile defense mode. So what that means, if you played mobile defense, you have these 2 transport units, you need to pull them up to an objective, pick up a bunch of resources, bring it back to your home base. Overall, it's a fun game mode. It starts off, it's a real slow burn and slowly builds up, but I think that's Regiments in general. It's a real slow-paced game in the beginning, and then it kind of turns into this absolute blast to play. Seeing how it's going to be done without the mobile defense will be interesting. I'm not a big fan of defense mode games. They're either a lot of fun or they're overly like grindy and just not that much fun. Like, right, remember when Horde mode for Gears of War just came out? It was like super, super fun to play, and then they just made it just terrible after a while. All right, then we have the meeting engagement / attack that uses node networks from the operation mode. That's kind of rumored, not ruined. It'll be interesting to see how that's implemented. So I'm not overly concerned about it. As long as the objectives don't rotate, that'll be fun. A mode or optional rule that places higher value on casualties inflicted or sustained. So overall, like an HVT mode, I mean, you could already do that if you just increase the casualty rate on the HQ units and just make everyone have an HQ unit, not make them have one, but if there's one on the field, it just sustains that. Overall, it sounds like a deathmatch mode, team deathmatch mode, where you kind of just cause more damage to someone and then you eventually win. It's a good practice for attrition warfare, but that's going to take a lot of AI work because the AI needs to value those units, and then you kind of need to give it like a reason to, you know, fight or keep them alive. Overall, it sounds like a complicated task to take on. All right, now let's continue on. Deeper morale and experience system. Oh boy. So like I was talking earlier, he brings up that a lot of things are going to get confusing or repetitive with the same regiments and same vehicles and same tactics being brought in. So he wants to add this deep morale / experience system. I'm not sure how it works right now, but overall, if your unit survives battle, it levels up. I think it's going to be complicated to implement. Like you're talking about giving units a morale, and then if they break or if they get routed, they'll run off the battlefield. It's a fine line to balance. Graviteam does it okay, but a lot of those players get confused why the units aren't engaging, why the commander's not around. So you're kind of biting off a big thing to chew, especially with that new skirmish mode. I hope you can accomplish that, but that's something I would be concerned about, is not adding excessive levels of micromanagement or like putting new constraints on the player that they may not be used to. Let me know if that's something you're excited for. New experience system. I don't know really what you're going to do with that. That's why a lot of games have this really just experience system that kind of just exists. You kill units, you capture objectives, more points for this, more points for that, less points for this. I'll like to see how he's going to go about that. It may all come down to just like regimental doctrines like he's talking about, and then just increasing the force structure or the squad sizes. You have Yugoslavia, a relatively weak nation during the Cold War, possibly. They have 5 tanks instead of 4 tanks, or they have a lot of infantry, you know, like they did in Combat Mission Italy, where they really increased the size of the platoons and the infantry and put them on the battlefield. So that may be something he needs to look into, or they need to look into. Terrain decals, absolutely necessary right now if you watch this gameplay. Really the only thing that's marked are the objectives. It may include some, or at least improve the immersion for some players when they're trying to capture the towns, or if the forts have a certain name. Ideally, that would be fantastic for co-op, put little markers on it. Destructibility, oh my god, destructibility. I don't know how they're going to implement this, because right now, you just kind of drive through the buildings similar to Warno. I'm not going to knock Regiments for that when it's all over, especially other war games. But if you're just going to really get rid of the defense modifier and the lines of sight, then I guess you can have urban destruction. Refined effects, I think that's really necessary. I mean, this ATGM has the same moves the same. It's always been that way. The ATGM just flies the same. Towed equipment, I really, really want to see that. Just towing howitzers around, that would be interesting. Be a little micro-y, but if they're strong, they're strong. I'd like to see different types of like artillery. Like, why don't we have different types of submunition? Everyone just lands on the same 3: high explosives, illumination, smoke, and improvised cluster munitions. Amphibious vehicles, like I said, that's going to be fun to check out. It's really going to be based around the maps. I mean, you could put some strikers in, I guess, some marine strikers, and have them drive across the ocean or a river. Long-range SAM support and combat air patrols. Okay, long-range SAM support's fine. I don't find the airstrikes too oppressive, in my opinion. I think the artillery is really oppressive, and it makes me just want like a C-ram or something, because, man, when the AI gets like 6 artillery pieces, I can just like roll my eyes so much they fall out of my head. Combat air patrols. This would be dope, and I know it's going to be an AC-130. It's always an AC-130. But the AC-130, like Cold War is fine, but game developers really need to expand upon their knowledge of the AC-130, in my opinion. It's become like a mobile bomb truck now. So it has missiles, like precision missiles, like the AC-130 Whiskey, I believe, that fire out of it and destroy like hardened like vehicles. Like you do have your howitzer or whatever and your different cannons. And it's also always high explosives or smokes. There's like different types of ammunition you can load in a howitzer. Please understand that. Also understand the AC-130 can now carry precision missiles depending on the model that it is, and I guess the air. It's Cold War, obviously, probably not then. But developers really need to, like, the doctrine is changing and evolving, so we need to kind of get on board as well, especially in modern games, that we need to adjust some of our games with that doctrine a little bit and get players used to playing with new weapon systems. and new doctrine and new challenges. Because overall, the AC-130 is just going to orbit, it's just going to fire its same cannons, and then it's going to leave. When in reality, it orbits, it has different ammunition types, it has a different mission, it has different types of precision munitions and missiles. So I think it's really time we expand upon what we include in our games, in my opinion. It's time to like evolve a little bit. All right, and then Steam Cloud saves, and more optional rules and events. That's all for the potential add-ons. All right, now we're moving into the things that may or may not, or definitely will not be included into regiments. So let's just stop real quick on the fighting spirit, level of training, logistics, and command aspects. That's all a part of the new AI or experience model they want to include, the deep morale. That's kind of the things they're going for. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of fine-tuning, and that's kind of stuff you'd include in a regiments too, especially if you're only going to keep this game alive or on like making content for a year. So that does sound like a lot of like long-term things you want to add to the game. I don't know how good the developer is at developing these things, so that's just worth noting. I mean, obviously made Regiments, was a fun game to play. Now other things they definitely will not be adding. Multiplayer, definitely not during Regiments 2022-2023 life cycle. So they're still unsure of how long they're going to be with developing Regiments. A map editor, highly unlikely due to the technical and possibly license-related constraints. I don't know anything about the license-related constraints, and I don't know anything about developing a map editor. So, that's a big no. Scenario editor, at least sort of. I totally skipped over this. They are going to add a customizable operations during one of the DLCs, but we'll see how that goes. I think that'll be fun to play. The game does have a lot of longevity if he can develop a lot of these things he wants to. So it kind of makes me concerned that he's going to immediately jump ship in 2023 for like a different project. But we'll see. We'll see what he wants to evolve into, or they want to evolve into. So at least we are getting some sort of customizable operations, not an in-depth scenario editor. Obviously, definitely challenging to make. And I'm going to leave you with my final thoughts. So overall, I'm really excited to see how Regiments develops throughout the year 2022-2023. I think they use a lot of wording that is questionable to me. Not that it's bad, it's just they aren't solid on anything. They do have like an outline. I think they kind of try to rush it out the door. It has been 30 days since launch. So I don't think they're sure of like the timeline, which they make very clear throughout this whole roadmap. I'm excited for some of the features. A lot of them sound like long-term features. I'm not a game developer. I'm a YouTube dude, and I'm a strategy game player, so I don't know if those features are long-term or if they're relatively easy to develop. I'm really concerned about the deep morale feature. I mean, it is what it is. It's hard to develop. It's hard to make fun. Overall, I'm excited for the combat air patrols, but I know it's just going to be an orbiting AC-130. I hope you guys are excited for the regiments. This isn't meant to be a downer video. It's just meant to be fun, and really, I go in depth into a lot of stuff. So leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Peace, dudes.